Thank you very much for inviting me in the great city of Istanbul. I'm so delighted and honored to have the chance to speak about the situation of the world with the presence of all the distinguished guests from all over the country, and also the very important person from the Istanbul city. My visit to Istanbul started from the end of the 1970s, so that is, I have more than 30 years of experience in this country. When I first came here, where I was studying in France, I took a car from Paris. It took 1 week to arrive in the city, visiting many places between Paris and Istanbul. And that was in summer, midsummer. And I enjoyed staying here for 2 weeks and visiting so many places, including the ancient monuments of the Byzantine side and also the very modern period. And for the memory of the Japanese, there is a university which is called Mimar Sinan University, was designed by a German architect called Bruno Taut. And I have a very interesting discussion with a professor of that university who still remembered the design activity of this brilliant German architect who was in Japan, who stayed in Japan before coming to Turkey. And even his house still reminds us of what he did in Japan and also in Germany. So that is my first encounter to this country. But after that, I had the chance to visit many places of Turkey. I have to say many, not majority of the country, because Turkey is so big country. I had the chance to cross the border to Iran before the revolution of the Iran and after the revolution of the Iran. So the surrounding countries are very different. And I also visited to cross the border to Syria or other countries. So anyway, so I experienced that the Turkey, with the presence of Istanbul, is the really center of the crossroad of whatever direction. And after 30 years, I come here, and just to like to exchange ideas of the Euro-Asia concerning its historical heritages and also the actual urban growth. So my title is Growth and Stagnation, Changing Map of the World. I have to add stagnation because not only in the growing countries, we have, for instance, even Japan is some moment, critical moment, although the social system infrastructure are well established, but the mentality, or psychologically speaking, we have problems in front of what we call the growth. So I have to explain what's happening. Next. What is actually where we are now? We are in the changing age. So production-oriented society used to be ours from the 19th century. Since the 19th century until the end of the 21st century, we were in the age of the production-oriented society. And industrialization is the key for prosperity. And the ethics was to produce, to fabricate, manufacture. And we constructed a lot. We constructed the big cities, we constructed the big public facilities, roads, trains, etc., etc. Factory is a symbol of the production. And after the Industrial Revolution, the cities were growing, and the population grew. And so this is the destiny of the industrial-oriented countries. And the world, as a result, the world was divided into the, advanced part of the world and abandoned or developing countries. Advanced part of the world enjoyed the prosperity because it stood on the basis of the agriculture of the majority of the world. That is less than 10% of the world. And urbanization means the immigration of the workers or those who works for industry or for other services. But the city means the gathering place of all those immigrants. And as a result, city grew quite rapidly. But since the end of the 20th century, last century, we were in the different world, information-oriented society. So that means distance doesn't matter. So we can share the informations wherever we are. And the flow of the information, that dominates the world. Sometimes in one part, the information gathers. So the economical system that moves according to that one. And the next day that goes to over the Atlantic Ocean, over the Pacific Ocean. So that's the information going passing through anywhere. And we're in such an unstable state. We don't know what happened tomorrow. Some bad news makes the center of the economy to other place. So this is not anymore the fabrication or industry-oriented society. But what we can do is to create values, human values, artistic values, or economic values, whatever values we can create, so that the people can come around. But we have the priority to live wherever we want. We can stay here, we can stay in the northern part of the world, or in an island, but the connection and the communication of the information makes us live in anywhere of the world. Sorry. And just I'd like to show you a very interesting map of the world, which was made by an English scholar, which is called a global projection of subjective well-being. This is subjective well-being, not objective. That how do we feel, whether we are happy or not. And this is a very interesting map. This Adrian White, a British scholar, who just followed the ideas of the happiness or well-being in the world. And according to this map, the dark color means they are more happy, and lighter color means they are less happy. So, many of you, so you can understand where you are from. Australians seems very happy. North Americans also. Nordic people, or Oman people, or Malaysians seems very happy. So many parts of Africa, and unfortunately Russians, they are unhappy. So, the first 10 countries, according to Adrian White, there's a more Nordic countries. But some Asian countries like Bhutan, Brunei. Brunei is a rich country, but Bhutan is a completely different country. And then Malaysia is also in the upper rank. America, 23rd. We have nearly 180 countries in the world. Germany. Italy. Italy, the 50th. So France, 60th. So okay, Italy, France, doesn't matter. Thailand, the 76th. Not so happy. China, 82nd. Less happy than Thai people. Japan is much less happy. 90s. That means we are unhappy people. Senegal, Africa. Turkey is not so good. Turkish people thinks that they are. I'm sorry, there's no. I have to check. Ethiopia, Russia, Georgia. Georgians are, I'm sorry to say that they are very unhappy people, right? I'm sorry that there's no Azerbaijan here, but okay, I have to check. But anyway, so that means Nordic countries, although the climate is very cold, they are very happy people. On the contrary, Russians, although the climate is very, very cold, they are not at all happy. Maybe it depends on what I said, their religious background or social background, or etc., even the political situations of that. And the basis for the well-being, family, dwelling, neighbor, climate, politics, city, employment, salary, gastronomy, education, heritage, and creativity, etc. So all these indicators, look at that, and so that explains the psychological situation of the nations. So the distribution of the happiness is not equal. Concerning how to show the map is really different. It used to be like that. There used to be a clear hierarchy of the world, according to GDP, or income, or productivity, there was a confrontation between industry and agriculture. Agriculture was considered to be the less advanced in that moment. So that means a poorer majority occupied or provides food to the wealthier minority. That used to be the scheme of the world until the middle of the 20th century. And the city is like that, density built-up cities with a concentration of population. People are immigrating the city. But we have the rise of the new nations or new powers who has more different resources. And actually, half of the world population enjoy the growth of economy and other the standard of life. But still, the poverty exists. And sometimes it is worse than before. And that deterioration of the city still remains. We have the grouping of the name of the BRICS. This is from some economists from the United States. So Brazil, Russia, India, China was grouped into the other major groups for the new, new powers, economic powers of the world. And other category called the VISTA. VISTA is Vietnam, South Africa, Indonesia, Turkey, Argentina. So BRICS and VISTA occupies the world, nearly 60% of the world population. So that means that the majority of the world is enjoying the growth, very rapid growth. And it is not anymore the distribution of the wealth of the beginning of the 20th century, where the imperialism theory was quite common. But what happened to those who enjoyed the prosperity, and what happened to those who are still suffering from the poverty? Poverty is another aspect of the world, and I think that 25% of the world is very in a serious state. And in African countries, and some part of the Central Latin America, are suffering from this kind of the poverty. And we have the expression of the absolute poverty. which means that the people are living under $1 a day. And there's a different type of the poverties in the world. For instance, South African type, or Indian continent type, or Russian Siberian type, or Middle East type. So it's really related to the climate or something like that. But we have to think about the poverty, although today we don't have the representative from Africa. But this, we have a high sign here. But the inequality of this kind of distribution still very outstanding in certain part of the world, like in Africa. We have to think it about. But at the same time, another type of the poverty prevails in what we call the advanced countries. This data from the OECD explains quite interesting. Relative poverty is different. It's more, how can I say, among the countries, distribution of the wealth. In certain countries like Denmark, Sweden, or Austria, so these countries, according to this data, they are more equal. The extreme, they don't have the extreme poor. They don't have the extreme rich. But the patterns like that, Japan and Turkey are the same. This data means the blue part is very poor comparatively. And the number of the percentage of the blue, very poor, is very large in Japan and in Turkey as well. So that means in the society, the difference between the rich and the poor is getting larger and larger in our countries. So this is not same. Although in the country like Japan or Turkey, there are a lot of productivities, but still among the people, although they work hard, they can't gain much. Some people get gains because of something like that, more economic activities. And another bad aspect, I have to say, in Japan, is another subjective poverty exists according to the type of the household. Single family, or if I say woman-headed single family, gains quite less. Japan and Turkey are the same. And that is, if we have the family, father, mother, or husband, wife, it is considered ordinary type of the household, so they can gain. But if, especially women is independent and they have a child, so it is considered to be a different type of the household, and they gain quite least. So this, according to these statistics, explains what. So we have to think about what is the future of such a kind of society. Maybe many of you know this story of Oshin, who was a heroine of the Japanese TV, and this program was distributed all over the world. This explains the poverty in Japan, but with the independence, she is climbing up to the hierarchy to become or overcome the poverty. That used to be the story of the success story in Japan. When she was a child, she lived in very modest or very bad state. But finally, she has grown up and the society was growing up. But this is not the reality of the world. And there's a very interesting pictures taken by an American photographer. And it was published in a book called Material World, A Global Family Portrait. This is a picture of the family or household taken by a photographer, but the condition like that. The photographer invites the family to go outside together with all of the belongings, all the properties which belongs to the family. In Mali, so this is the house, and the properties which belongs to the family is something like that, mainly for the kitchens like that. Bhutan, the same. Then Bhutan people think they are very happy, but materially they are not rich at all. Russia. I think the photographer had taken the picture intentionally in winter. In some part of China. Japan. And I have to explain that the Japan is building condition is not so good because the land property is very expensive. So the house is not so big. Actually, so Japan is gaining the surface of the house. The average surface for one family is exactly the same as in France. But still the housing condition, especially the exterior space, is not so good. And because of their desire to live in the modern society. So what we like to say is the richness or happiness does not always concern the materiality. It is more subjective. And once the society reached to the goal of the certain level of the maturity, we have completely different kind of the social goals. But at the same time, another aspect is aging society. Is European countries and Far Eastern countries like Japan, Korea, share the same destiny. The aged people, more than 65 years old, is getting bigger and bigger. Japan is near almost 20%. So, in future, so what is the destiny of the younger children? And if the actual ratio of the decrease of the population continues, after 500 years, Japan will be a country of 150,000 people. Korea will be a village. China will be very big. So the actual population growth is really critical for these countries like Japan, Korea, or some European countries. And it is really depending on the will of the people. So that means from political level or that ordinary daily life level. Vacancy is another indicator to understand the situation of actual society. Vacant house and flats in Japan is 13%, very big. So every one house among 6-7 houses are empty. No one lives. So at the same time, so we have the relative poverty. And due to the lack of the human resource, it is very difficult to maintain the once existed potential of the urban society. So one tendency to go to the direction of the compact city to decrease the size of the city from those which people over-constructed, to make the city and environment much more compact. And you may see the future of Japan. So the concentration of the population is limited to certain places, Tokyo metropolitan area, and Nagoya, and Osaka area. And other parts are decreasing like that. So if you remember the Japanese shape, that is very strange. And only the Tokyo part is growing, and other parts is shrinking. And in general, we have to say the tendency of shrinking or shrinking society is quite apparent. And in front of those who are growing now, more of the majority of the world, approximately 13 or 14% of the world is facing the serious problem, the shrinking. These are the once prosperous society in Europe as well, and in Russia at the same time. And just for this opportunity to discuss about the future of the countries in between, from the Far East to the Europe, so there are so many different countries. And some parts are really flourishing for growing. Some are facing the problem of the shrinking. So what will be our reconciliation amongst us? Although the richness of the heritage, richness of history, we can share. Just have to show how vacant Japan is. So this is the distribution of the vacant houses in the center of the Tokyo. This Tokyo, center of Tokyo, is really, it looks very dense. But the reality is 13% or more than 14% vacant. So we need a completely different type of the approach for urban plannings. What we call the modern type of the urban planning is useless. It doesn't work anymore. We have to think about a completely new theory and practice. And with the presence of the Mr. Furuichi, just I have to say, the idea of the megacity of the Kenzo Tange is good or not for this kind of the shrinking city. No such architect thinks about the shrinking pattern of the society. They were much earlier than our age. So after half a century, our direction, I'm not sure whether go whichever. We have to share a lot of opinions among with you. And what is funny is that according to the novels of Andersen, Denmark, Japanese people subjectively thinking we are shrinking, and they are saying we are ugly duckling. So the neighbors are just watching Japan in such a way. What should we? So what we call this is the ugly duckling syndrome. But we need some strategy for overcome the ugly duckling syndromes. There may be a lot of solutions. We can discuss a lot of our partners or our friends. But according to my experience, there must be some scenario for it. And the heritage is, of course, very important. So it's a creative engine. And the innovation of life, different type of the life through innovation of life and technology. Technology is also still very, very important. And the local community, local empowerment, community-based approach is much more important than what we call the grand design. And the relation between the public and private is very important. We have to very close relation with, although we are public or private, is a very human type of the communication. And so we have a lot of negative properties, which is not useful anymore, but we have to convert it to another type of the richness. So especially we need this kind of the technology or innovative approach to make the society subjectively prosperous. So I do hope that during this conference we can share the ideas of creating new values for the coming age, especially for the future of a younger generation. Thank you very much.
Thank Professor Miak for his interesting report, especially about the index of well-being. I should say I don't know whether I'm happy or not in China, because we are truly very busy and have no time to think about these things. But I should tell Mr. Baz, I should tell you that we are very happy in Istanbul, very happy in Istanbul, because of the beautiful cultural heritage, because of the warm-hearted people, and especially because of the comfortable climate, especially comparing Istanbul to Beijing. I should say, I feel this place is really very good, much better than our place. So actually, you know, in today's China, in the one hand, we are facing a big challenge, like a good opportunity to have a very nice time for the economic development. We can find in every place, in every city of China, every place is changing in every day. It is so fast. Imagine maybe beyond the imagination of ourselves. But in the other hand, we are also facing big challenges. It's just about how to conserve our natural environment, and especially for our cultural heritage. So Professor Zhang Jie, as one of the most outstanding colleagues of our schools, and Vice Chairman of the Historic Committee at the Ministry of Construction of our country. So he's always deeply engaged in policy make for the central government, and also have made a lot of practical projects in the important cities across whole China. So I think he can use this opportunity to introduce some current situation about development and conservation in today's China. So welcome, Professor Zhang Jie. Welcome.
Thanks, Professor Zhang, and distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to take this opportunity to express our great thanks to our Turkish friends and our Japanese friend and all those people who have put great effort and time to make this great event to happen. And I'm very honored to address at such a great event. I think for most of the audience here, probably it's not familiar to all of you. China is a big nation with great regional diversities and cultural diversities. As the main carriers of civilization, historic cities and settlements of any other kind in China present vividly the richness of culture and history of the locality. And here I should give a brief review of the development of urban conservation in contemporary China by focusing on policy, institution framework, planning theory and method, and finally, mechanisms for implementation. First, the policy and institution framework. In 1982, 2 years after the reform, The State Council of China published the first list of historic city and cultural cities of national importance, including Beijing, Chengde, and others. Criteria for such cities were also set up at that time. It is said that cities meeting the following conditions may apply for such status: existence of great number of ancient monuments, large historical areas remained, general historical structure and townscape or cityscape of the city were kept. Finally, fourth, the city once played important functions in history, be it administrative, culture, and economic center, transport, node, key military structure, and so on. Up to now, 3 lists of such cities has been published, covering more than 110 cities. Through the 3 lists, we can see the extension of contents of historical cities. It was started with the important traditional Chinese cities and extended to important cities developed by the Western powers in the early modern period. But cities on the 3rd list and of even the later designation expressed the strong local government initiatives rather than historic values per se. Other 2 important conservation packages developed much later are conservation areas, historic towns, and villages. According to the government policies, listed cities must consist of at least 2 conservation areas. By definition, in those areas, traditional streetscapes are kept with a high concentration of historic buildings which present a specific period of the city's history. For instance, there are 43 conservation areas in the city, in Beijing municipality, 44 in Shanghai. Similarly, to the historic cities, historic towns and villages of national importance are focused on its richness of immovable cultural assets, historic importance, and extensive traditional neighborhood. Now there are totally 108 towns and 143 villages under such program. Conservation areas of listed cities, historic towns and villages are granted by governments of a province or autonomous regions or municipalities and directly and to the central government. Lastly, as many countries, China's listed city program also pays a great attention to individual monuments and historic buildings. Listed buildings may have different local titles. For instance, in Beijing, they are named as architectural excellence of modern period, besides the listed traditional courtyards. In Shanghai, architectural excellence in history, and so forth. These programs are the 4 responsibilities of local governments. For instance, there are 31 early modern buildings listed, plus some 600 traditional courtyards in Beijing. In Shanghai, there are more than 600 buildings listed. The conservation of such buildings with outstanding architectural values requires authentic restorations of a facade, yet leaves the interiors open to modernization or remodeling. For monument reservation is very similar to that in any other countries. So I should save it here for the sake of time. In recent years, the State Council has issued a new policy to stress the importance of intangible cultural heritages. Now, more than 1,000 items are listed by the State Council. Of them, 28 are granted by the UNESCO. Many of those heritages are related in listed cities, towns, and villages, as well as conservation areas. Before the reform, cities in China suffered a great shortage of investment in infrastructure, transport, commercial facilities, and housing due to the government's unbalanced policy in favor of heavy industry development. Therefore, cities became more and more congested. The former grand mansions and houses for the better off were gradually dilapidated. Most historic cities and towns lost their walls mainly for ideological reasons during the 50s and 60s, some even in the late 70s. The rapid urbanization process triggered by the reform created a serious threat to towns and cities of historic importance. From the mid-80s to the mid-90s, many cities experienced large-scale redevelopments and great loss in historic sectors. This period was also witnessed a gradual weakness of public consciousness for conservation. Conservation area, both as a professional concept and a social willingness, began to take shape. In the year 2002, Beijing, for the first time in the country, issued conservation plans for its 25 conservation areas, which later extended to 33 in the old city areas. In institutional respect, urban conservation in China has developed What should I do? Should I? Oh, I'm sorry. At national level, there are national laws such as the Law of Protection for National Monuments, Law of City and Country Planning, Act of Protection for Historic and Cultural Cities of National Importance, Historic Towns and Villages of National Importance, and so on. At a local level, many cities have already issued their own acts of various kinds to protect their historic cities, towns, villages, and conservation areas, and other items. In terms of professional practice, research, and education, there are several key related bodies and programs have been established focused on conservation across the country. Financially, both the central and the many local governments have set up special funding for urban conservation. From 2006 to the year 10, 1 million yuan were allocated by the central government for structural works in conservation areas, historic cities, towns, and villages. Also, many entrepreneurial local governments have worked very closely with the market to restore historical buildings. In order to guarantee the job done properly, in recent years, Ministry of Housing, Urban and Rural Construction has built up an inspection system to supervise the local government in urban conservation. Next, I shall move on planning theory and techniques developed in urban conservation in China. Up to now, city conservation in China consists of 4 levels. First, the protection of the integrity of urban structure and the cityscape of listed cities. Second, protection of urban conservation areas. Third, monuments and listed buildings as mentioned above. And finally, fourth, safeguarding intangible heritage related. In terms of the protection of the integrity of urban structure and cityscape of the listed cities, two approaches have been developed. One is to try to protect the listed city, towns untouched by guiding major developments into planned new cities or areas, such as in the case of Lijiang. This is a very famous small city in Yunnan province in southwest China. However, most of cities, especially the large ones, have chosen to develop their historical city areas while vast new areas are expanding, such as in the case of Beijing and Shanghai. Taking Beijing as an example, in order to protect the historical city as a whole, 10 planning strategies have been developed over the years, including the protection of the grand central axis, the configuration of the old city walls, the palace city conservation areas, building height controls, and so forth. Recently, there is a growing concern in the protection of the surrounding environments of historical cities and villages for the uncontrolled urban sprawl or development. Historically, cities and settlements of any other kind were closely tied to their surroundings, not only from the sense of environment, but also in terms of function and culture. Cities and towns, villages, garrisons, resorts were all inseparable parts of the imperial system in the holistic sense. There, in fact, exists a network of heritage around the central cities or towns in China. Therefore, the protection of such network becomes a new dimension of urban conservation in China. The protection of conservation area, those are some examples to protect the surrounding environment, both as a ecological and also as cultural purpose. The protection of conservation areas is a more complicated one. In Beijing, where protection of the integrity of the whole historic city is on a high agenda, totally more than 20 square kilometers of the old city areas have been listed as conservation areas. The planning intention is to safeguard courtyard-based gradual renewal, while some courtyards to be adapted and reused. On the contrary, Shanghai worked in a more scattered yet practical fashion, where totally 32 conservation areas have been designated. 10 of them are scattered in the old city center. Conservation areas are not limited to the listed cities. Areas of outstanding architectural, cultural, and historical values are also the targets. Laojie in Huangshan City, Anhui Province is among those types. Since last year, in order to promote conservation areas encouraged by the Ministry of Culture, National Bureau of Heritages, 3 major related newspapers set up an annual nationwide event to mobilize local authorities, experts, and the general public to get involved in the election of 10 best historical areas. The first best 10 elected last year were chosen from some 200 applicants across the country. As far as monuments and listed buildings are concerned, for a great deal of international common practice and principles are shared in China, so I shall escape from this. For a long time, lack of investment. Most of historic cities are in dilapidations, so upgrading and major enhancements, both physically and functionally, are the interest of local authorities and the general public. Examples can be cited as the linear park of the site of former imperial city wall in Beijing. That's on the top right. And the Ming City Wall waterfront park in Nanjing, and the extension of the Daming Lake in Jinan. Now there are some new developments in heritage conservation planning related in urban conservation. The first is a large site of ancient monuments or tombs, such as the protection areas of ancient city site of Han Dynasty in Xi'an, the Sui and Tang Dynasty cities in Luoyang. Although those vast ancient city sites have been long controlled, but only recently some concrete actions taken following the contemporary conservation principles. The slides on the bottom right shows the ambitious conservation and related development of Grand Daming Palace of the Tang Dynasty in Xi'an. I believe one of the Chinese colleague is here got involved in the grand projects. You might have some more information from him, Professor Liu Kesheng. And the second, linear cultural heritage such as the Grand Canals, the Silk Road, of course, the Great Wall. Settlements of many kinds along many other types of historic and cultural properties are engaged in those grand heritage projects. In what sense heritage planning can claim those projects are taken in a comprehensive, coordinated, yet definable manner becomes intellectual and pragmatic challenge to Chinese conservationists. Finally, I should give a quick look at three primary models of implementation of conservation projects in China. First, government finance large-scale projects. These types of projection often related to high-profile city events, whereby a large amount of government funding is poured into a large area of urban sectors are included. These are the pictures of the Hutong or house, transitional housing areas upgrading just before the Olympic Games in Beijing. Second, market-oriented, but with having government support, whereby conservation is highly commercialized, such as the controversial yet commercially successful Xintiandi in the center of Shanghai. Finally, citizens' participation with government subsidies, such as in the case of Shaoxing, a small city in Zhejiang province. To conclude, although both as an academic discipline and social practice, urban conservation in China did not take place until the early 1980s. There saw a fast development in the field of conservation in China over the last 30 years, in terms of a legal and policy framework, institutional establishment, education and techniques involvement, implementation models, and so forth. It is needless to say that many common principles are now highly shared by conservationists in China, but the true challenge is that how conservation can be the real part of the world's most rapid urbanization process taken in one of the oldest civilizations, yet with great resource constraints. This is probably the place where professionals, general public, and the decision makers of China reserve their very wisdom and contribution to the word urban conservation. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Zhang Jie, for providing us so plentiful information about the frame and the system of conservation in today's China. According to original program, we should arrange enough time for the discussion, but due to the time have been delayed and not. So I think we can only allow 1 or 2 questions to our speakers. So do you have any question? Oh, 1 question. Okay, please.
Thank you very much. I just want to learn what is the exact words that takes place in the Chinese conservation telling about the historical heritage.
You mean
the constitution, Chinese constitution.
Yes.
What is the exact word or
okay.
terminology that is used in the article of the constitution?
You mean
Yeah, of course, constitutional law.
we have in China the Chinese government. There are 2 branches really work on conservation. One is the Ministry of Culture and also the National Bureau of Heritages. That's one side. They look at the monuments, okay, list the monuments and the intangible heritages. Also, we have the Ministry of Housing, Rural and Urban Development, which used to be the Ministry of Construction, which look at the cities and settlements conservation, like listed conservation areas and also the listed buildings. Because construction always look after by the Ministry of Construction. So there are 2 bodies work together. Often, any kind of a national status to be granted have to be a unified meeting or whatever working meeting. So have to be taken by these 2 bodies. Would that answer your question?
Of course, you have certain hierarchy in the laws of China dealing with conservation.
Yes.
The first law is constitution, and then comes the laws and certain bylaws and regulations.
Yes.
You told us that in the upper place, in the most upper place, is the constitution dealing with conservational issues. I am asking, what is the exact terminology that is used in the constitutional law?
Yes.
What is the exact sentences? What is the exact phrase? Can you tell us?
We have the cultural relics and also historical cities, historical towns.
About conservation of these urban areas, of historical heritage. How do you say, what kind of terminology you use in your
Protection.
Yes.
Protection of historical cities or towns or historical buildings.
Yes. In the constitutional law.
Yes.
How do you say it?
You have to safeguard, blah, blah, blah, all the items listed.
Just you say protect.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
But the lower level actual, you have reuse and the control of new developments, all that. Okay.
Is there another question? No more question? Okay, thank Professor Zhang Jie and thank Professor. So this is the ending of the first session. So I should change the chair position to you. Okay. Oh, you, yeah, okay, thank you.
Koridor ayrı bir termin olarak belki bu oturumlarda da ele alınabilir. Nostaljik olarak İpek Yolu bir lojistik ticari ağ veya yol olarak ifade edilse de Doğu'nun batıyla Batı'nın da Doğu'yla kültürel ve medeniyetler arasında bir network olduğunu hepimiz biliyoruz. Geniş bir coğrafya ve bu coğrafya içerisinde farklı kültürler ve bu kültürlerin yerleşkeleri ve de ekosistemleri var. Günümüze kadar İpek Yolu olarak bildiğimiz bu coğrafya nedense bu çalışma içerisinde Avrasya koridoru tanımı altında işleniyor. Belki ben biraz gelenekselciyim, kusura bakmayın. Ama koridoru büyüttük ve içerisindeki yerleşkelerin alanlarını da daha genişletmiş olduk. İpek Yolu zaten içerisindeki kültürlerle ve içerisindeki coğrafyanın vermiş olduğu değerlerle, kimlikleriyle oldukça zengin, çeşitliliğe sahip. Bu İpek Yolu'nun ve bu koridorun en önemli kriterlerinden bir tanesi. İsterseniz şimdi bu koridor içerisinde yer alan yerleşkelerle ilgili kentsel gelişmenin, büyümenin ve de beraberinde getirmiş olduğu konuyu ele alışla ilgili olaraktan farklı ülkelerin değerli akademisyenlerinin bu konudaki görüşlerini alalım. Bu nedenle ilk önce Taşkent Mimarlık Fakültesinden Profesör Şukurov Askarov'u davet ediyorum. Buyurun.